Nobody needs to infiltrate the Vatican. The Vatican is what infiltrates.
There's a French journalist who is gay himself who went in to basically interview the priests in the Vatican.
Oh, okay.
He said, I'm doing an account of the Vatican. Well, you know, he spent a while there,
Years, right?
Yeah, years. And he came out and basically said in this book, he said, there are a lot of gay priests there, and there are a lot of pedophiles, and both are protecting each other because they don't want each other to get exposed.
Yeah,
So
they don't
like,
want to out
you
each
say
other.
anybody, you tell anybody I fuck boys, and I'm going to tell people you fuck guys, and it's this whole, and it came out in the book,
Facts.
and it's a real,
Facts,
I mean, it's from interviews.
Well, if you know the history of the Roman Catholic Church, you know Constantine. This is like mainstream history. Constantine, he was a pagan, which can be considered Luciferian.
Frank Rudy, there it is.
Yeah, that's in the Vatican. That's the Serpent
Yeah, that's
Cathedral.
dope.
Come on, man.
Yeah,
That's a
that's
serpent.
Should
Look
do
at
a
the
show
fangs.
there, Joe.
Look at the fangs and look at the eyes.
That
Look
is
at
a
that tongue.
serpent.
Come on.
Look at the tongue that comes
The
out of the
Vatican's
fangs.
been
That's
pretending
amazing.
they're into Christ. They're not into Christ. They want to destroy Christ.
Oh, wait, that's supposed to be a snake?
They're trying to destroy
That's-
Christ.
Oh, I
pretty
see
wild.
Bro, that
now.
is
You don't
snake.
see this? Look at that. Look
I
at the
see it.
fangs.
Give it up,
That's
bro.
the
I see it.
Vatican.
That
That's
is
the-
snake.
Inside of a
How is that Jesus? How is that Jesus right
That's a
there?
snake.
Where is Jesus?
Is that the Vatican?
That is the Vatican. That is a snake. I mean, like, go to that upper left corner that you got there, right there, Jamie, right there. Yeah. That when you zoom in on that, can't click on it. Doesn't click.
It's so
That's it.
amazing.
What is that?
That's St. Peter's Basilica.
No, what's it zoomed in on,
It's
though?
it's a fucking enormous church.
It's so much bigger than that.
It's so big. It's
Look at
hard.
the snake, but the snake one. How do we get past that snake one?
You guys just going to
somebody
How do we
blaze
get
loves
over
past
that?
that?
Somebody loves snakes.
Those are the same people that came up with the Big Bang Theory.
Same people who are into butterflies.
They're
Like,
the same people who did the Hella
Hey, bro.
Waits Cathedral
There's
and then
people
the
with-
Serpent Cathedral.
there's people
They
with Hello
came up with
Kitty
Big Bang
tattoos.
Theory.
It's just level,
It's the same people, dude.
Big Bang Theory. Come on.
They're
at
trying
that.
to kill Christ. They're
Look
not
at-
trying to. They're not Christian.
Look
They're,
at this
they're
St.
lying.
Peter's Basilica.
Yeah,
No
that thing
power
looks
tools.
sick.
No power tools. No fucking cranes.
Meanwhile, maybe they did have
That's my
power tools.
favorite
They
place
just
to
say
be
that.
in. The paintings in there that were done, they were started by one artist and then finished by another artist because that artist died. It took him it took him a lifetime, and then another guy took on.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Who gets the
man.
credit? Like,
No one.
It-
There's no one. In fact, that's
Sistine
what's interesting
Chapel.
about that kind of
Jesus
art. It was
Christ
done
does
for
that,
God, and it wasn't done. Nobody signs it, right? It wasn't about you. It was about the larger picture, and that's the difference between architecture back then and architecture today. Architecture, like today, if you see, it's about the architect. You see these incredible structures, like whatever it might be. These structures that we go and visit all the time. We don't really know. It was done by maybe one guy, then another guy, but that's never. It was commissioned by a king. You hear about the king who financed it. You don't hear about the guy who built it because that wasn't the point back then.
wasn't it the Freemasons? Did they build everything?
No, it was the
Masons.
aliens. It was the Anunnaki.
Eddie's onto something here, man.
This is old. This is
Definitely
old
onto
shit.
this.
This is old shit.
So when
that's
was
old.
this?
I
When
was
was
like,
this
bullshit,
telescope
man.
created? When was this telescope created?
Well, it's,
I don't
It's an
know.
observatory in Arizona. The
Right,
Jesuits
but-
were always
But when?
both scientists.
What's the art, Jamie? When
Oh,
it's-
scroll up, Jamie. I
scroll
think it's
up.
on the right there.
2004. That's when they started it. Imagine being a part of a gigantic religious institution and naming a telescope. You could say like the God Eye. You can call it the God Eye.
Yes. How did that one? Can you imagine the meeting where the top 3 names were like, okay, we got Jesus Eye, we got God of Light, and we got Lucifer. We got Lucifer.
Lucifer.
How did that one get picked? Can you imagine the press
By
conference for
Jesuits.
that?
By Jesuits.
When they
no less.
unveiled this telescope and they at the Vatican and they call it Lucifer.
How did that get picked? What a weird
How did that go
conversation
down?
that must have been.
Come on. There had to be one guy opposed to it. At least one guy.
What are
the
we saying?
fuck are you
Lucifer!
talking? It means
Lucifer's the
I know
Antichrist.
it sounds crazy, but look, L lucent, U universe,
Yeah.
C cosmology.
It's a bulky
I,
name, too.
Interstellar, F
Fuck
forever, E Earth, R radius of Earth. Come on, man.
We dig it.
It's easy.
We dig it. We dig
It's
it.
easy.
And we dig it.
Lucifer. Are you but it's Satan. But it's not Satan. It's not Satan. It's Lucifer. It's an acronym. Okay?
It's true.
But we are the house of God, and this is Lucifer. It's his enemy. It's a coincidence.
It's a coincidence.
You didn't
It's
even
a
know it was there, Brian.
coincidence.
I didn't know how. I didn't know.
And meanwhile, okay. What about the serpent cathedral with the fangs and the snake eyes?
It's a coincidence.
What about the resurrection sculpture?
Well, you know,
Artists,
the serpent was
architects.
the reason why we're human.
What about
Serpent talked to
Constantine
Eve.
was pagan
Yeah.
and said, and even the mainstream history says that he never converted. That was bullshit. That's mainstream. So if he never converted,
Constantine? I thought there
he
was
said
some
he didn't
debate.
convert. Yeah,
But
there
I
was
thought-
but the
I think
fact that there
there's-
is a debate.
I don't
the
think
fact-
there's
It was a
main-
political decision.
But yeah, exactly. So the one theory, and it's either one or the other. It's he actually did convert to Christ, or he just said that for political purposes. But meanwhile, he was still pagan, right? It's one or the other. And then you start looking at the Vatican. You're like, man, they're the ones who are creating the stuff that turned people away from the Bible. They created the Big Bang Theory. If you believe in the Big Bang Theory, you're like, how could the Bible be true? How could Jesus be in charge of the Big Bang
You
Theory?
can be
There's
religious
no
and
God.
scientific too, right?
Yeah,
There
but
is
it's
faith
part.
and
But
reason.
no,
Tough
you're
dance.
right. You're right. But
Yeah,
if you
pick
were
a
trying
side,
to
bro.
kill, if you were trying to kill religion, you want everything that's opposite of the religion, right? If they're because religion, the Bible tells you that we're on a special place with the firmament.
Are you saying the Catholic Church trying to kill religion?
I didn't say that.
Is that what you're insinuating? This doesn't make any sense.
Eddie, this has become a sacrifice.
That is.
Don't hack off any dicks. Let's
I
wait till
never
the
said
pizza
that.
arrives.
I never said that.
Are we getting pizza?
Wait till the pizza rises.
Catholicism.
Heavyweight division.
I got a little excited about
The
that.
Catholic Church loves Jesus.
It was partying. It was their own 27 acres. It was saloons. They brought in female hookers. There was gay guys in there. Everything. It was Bohemian Grove, what they called it that, because people did whatever they wanted. And it was open, and they had like poetry and they had plays and all the rest of it. Then by the time Howard Taft became president, the Republicans basically bought it. So the reason it's important is the Republicans go there to they ship in all these private hookers, all these jets land nearby. But they also have a lot of gay sex, which they use then to basically compromise people into the cult. And so there's a lot of gay sex. I was in there for one day. I snuck in. I looked good back then. They hit on me a lot. I had people I recognized from TV walking around, hey, let's go right now. I mean, it's a big gay hookup deal for Republicans. I'm just telling you what it is. So I'm sitting there during the ritual, and I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool. And the dude goes, shut up, I'll kill you. And they're all taking it very seriously. And I'm not saying it's a gay thing. I'm saying that some of that goes on there.
You were saying it was cool and people were getting angry that you were saying
No, I mean, I was just quietly going, oh, this is really interesting. And they're like, shut up. This is a very important ritual. And they were taking it very serious. This hearse comes in with the body of a child. It is an effigy. They're not killing it. And
well, it's just a bundle of sticks, right?
Yeah, well, it looks like a kid. No, later, others infiltrated later that worked there and got us photos of it. It's an image of a kid. It's a little kid.
Because Moloch in biblical is who they sacrifice the Canaanite.
It's a
kid.
bull, but
Yeah.
they do it as an owl. But
They do it
call
as an owl, yeah. But that's from the Bible. Is you would sacrifice a child to Moloch.
Give not your
Yeah.
children to the fires of Moloch.
Right,
And
right.
and so I've given it to experts in religious history. It's not even from Christian perspective. Yeah. It's a Faustian deal mixed with Babylonian and religious stuff from Tyre.
Yeah.
It's
Like,
quirky.
look at that. Look at that owl god and look at the fire underneath the owl god.
And there's Ronald Reagan
I mean, if you saw that, if you were in the woods and you just saw that, you would be terrified.
and
in
Richard
my
Nixon
pants.
said,
Yeah.
Richard Nixon on the Richard Nixon tape says it's a gay orgy.
Richard Nixon said
You
that?
can pull up Richard Nixon talks about
Yeah, Richard Nixon said something about it where he.
it's the most goddamn faggy thing you ever seen.
I think it's just allowing.
Well, nothing against that's what it's saying.
So these are just these elite institutions where, and Skull and Bones, I think they seek to create close friends amongst people that may not know each other, create loyalty amongst this group of people.
That's why they got to tell them all the things they've
yeah,
done.
you got to tell them all the sexual history, all that stuff. They want these people to be loyal to each other. So when they're not loyal to the laws of America, they're loyal to this oath that they take with each other.
And exactly, and it's like a
Right.
Team
Look at this.
America.
Look at this. Descendant sues Skull and Bones over Geronimo's bones. Documents show George W. Bush's grandfather robbed Geronimo's grave. Members of the secret society allegedly steal valuable things and put them in tomb. Great grandson says Geronimo should be buried in accordance with tradition. Federal law protects Native Americans' rights to their family members' remains.
And let's expand on that. What he just said, because this guy's done his studying. It's like
Thank you.
It's like in Team America when the head guy goes.
It's the only person who's ever said I've
No,
studied.
no. Nobody says he goes, suck my cock, Gary. It's not about sex. in Skull and Bones and Bohemian Grove, what he said is most of these guys are not gay. It's an act of dominance, like, oh, you're a senator, you want to be president, bend over, and like a former president screws you in the ass. And that's what they do. I mean, the ritual is, I'm in charge, bend over.
Well, isn't that a thing with fraternities anyway? Like hazing? That you jizz on a cracker?
Exactly. So it's the next deal.
Yeah, there was a lot of fucking Nazi scientists brought over
On
here.
YouTube, it says Operation Paperclip was anywhere from like 1,200 to 1,500 scientists.
Search engine. The total number of admitted congressional hearings in the 1970s.
Operation Paperclip.
Frank Church Committee in the 70s released it. I believe the number's 34,200 and something. Look it up.
There's a
Just
lot.
like I told you, they gave people syphilis. You pulled it up.
But it is fascinating that they brought those people over here, and that's where the space program came from.
That's why I wore this shirt, not as a sick joke. They already had the CIA that was OSS. Anyways, let me expand on that. The OSS was British intelligence, or the most powerful intelligence agency ever. They set up Proud House in 22 after World War II to anglicize the U.S. with British intelligence. Not a British intelligence takeover, a marriage. This is like on PBS.
Okay.
This is stuff that's true, they admit. So they think only academics are watching it, so they'll tell the truth. The general pop culture is all crap. Meant to be dumbed down, meant to turn you off. But when you go to the real academic stuff, like in the old days of Frontline and stuff, like I watched that, didn't know it was true. Later I got the documents, it's all real. That like those shows are like really accurate. Like Bobby Kennedy planned to blow up the embassy in Honduras and stuff like that. What was I getting to?
I don't know.
Nazis.
Well,
Warner von Braun. Isn't it weird? Isn't it weird that the one man who directed all 6 moon missions was a Nazi, and he was brought in over?
Weird.
Isn't it weird that one
Isn't that crazy?
One guy didn't smoke weed, and one guy's having a problem with his memory? 2 guys did. And
Hey, you want to defend Warner von Braun?
Hey, I'm not defending him. In
That's fine. I get it.
1935,
Nazis,
and I've seen documentaries
smart.
and read about it. He sketched for Hitler this plan to drop atomic bombs that they hadn't developed yet. So when you see Red Skull, Marvel comic, they've got a big bomber to blow up New York.
Yeah.
It wasn't a bomber, it was a space plane. And it was about half the size, but looked just like this. And the Germans, actually, some of their scientists went to the Russians. Remember when the Russians tried to build their space shuttle and it was half the size? Mm-hmm. That was actually the German plan. So you look it up. I'm not kidding.
Because the Russians took a lot of Germans as well, correct?
About a third of them, yeah. So look. The reason I'm wearing this is to explain this is a gateway to all of it. So you have British intelligence that had won World War I, even though Germany had way more advanced technology. They then take over. British intelligence basically merges with the U.S., and then the Germans and others say we've got to go way ahead in technology. It was all theoretical in labs, but they couldn't mass deploy it. They didn't have enough machine shops and systems to build it, and U.S. Special Forces went on suicide missions and blew up the underground mountains.
How about the Nazis were the first to build flying saucers?
All of it.
How crazy is that?
But let me tell you.
That's crazy.
So,
isn't that a coincidence?
So British
Amazing
intelligence.
cars.
British intelligence.
Flying
sets up
saucers, dude.
The CIA in 47. So now the Nazis are over here and they go, listen, you don't want them running everything. And they go to Eisenhower and they say, we want to launch a off-base breakaway civilization where you compartmentalize things, forget empires, and you have a new ruling class of technological elites, and then the elites are all in charge. The public's watching TV, and we'll give them widgets and foundation series type things to divert them. This is all in the documents. And let them try to run an empire. We'll build a whole new empire. And so Eisenhower gives a speech, he doesn't just say military-industrial complex. He says the technological elite. Watch the full 21-minute speech, his farewell address in 62. He says, or 61, he says, you need to watch out about the scientists because he said no to the NASA plan when he found out what it was.
What is it?
It's a breakaway civilization where you don't try to run the whole planet. You siphon off resources and build a whole new advanced system, and then you play everybody off against each other and collapse it. So when I say, what is NASA? If we could take NASA back over, it's bigger than the CIA. It's the real government. The spaceships and the stuff, that's all PR.
Is there any conspiracy theory that you kind of are suspicious of? There's got to be at least one.
Yeah, there's definitely. I'm
which one? Like 9/11. 9/11, you think, are you familiar with Tower 7?
Yeah, I would say from almost every story, even the stuff we've talked about before in the past, I don't believe the official in quotes.
Okay. So you know that Tower 7 was the third tower that went down. You're aware of that, right?
Yeah, I look more when that comes up. All of the surrounding information about what was in the buildings, not the actual event. I know the event happened. I'm not so curious about that.
But did you see the video of Tower 7 just going falls at free fall speed? That's got to be a little suspicious. Right, a red flag got to come up, at least, right? If you're really trying to get to the truth, you're like, wait a minute.
I would say it's more suspicious that a third building fell that wasn't
even hit. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what the whole story is with Tower 7. And not only was it not touched by a plane, it went down at free fall speed, and it's caught on video like 5 different angles. Right? There's 5 different angles. No one's saying that it's fake footage. That's Tower 7, a 47-story skyscraper, fucking falling at free fall speed. Some people are saying it got hit with a direct energy weapon. Some people are saying that it was brought down like a controlled demo in Vegas, like one of those buildings, But regardless of how it was brought down, you got to look at that video footage and go, wait a minute.
And why is YouTube taking down Building 7 footage?
Yeah.
CNN.
What do you think happened with Tower 7?
CNN, ABC, and CBS told me the government blew it up. But then I interviewed the head of emergency management for New York.
Yeah.
And the loose change people got him on. And he says, no, I was there. They had bombs. The CIA. You know it was based in Building 7, right?
What?
The CIA, the FBI, all of it.
Wasn't it NSA as well?
Everything. See, he always says, oh, I don't know. He goes, I'm not just kissing Joe's ass. Like, he's beyond
Joe
Alex
knows
Jones.
what's up.
No, it's bullshit, man.
No,
I mean, you know
forget
every
things.
fucking thing, dude. Just fucking say it yourself. No.
Why don't you explain it to everybody?
You know who Dr. Judy Wood is?
No. I do know.
She's got Dr. Judy Wood wrote a book called "Where Did the Towers Go?"
Yeah, particle
and her
beam stuff.
theory. Her theory is this is just some lady, scientist lady.
No, I know. She said it was a federal agent for not believing her.
Based on the
I've
fact
heard
that there was, this is what she claims, based on the video
Her and Fetzer?
and the pictures that she has of where the towers collapsed.
By the way, I'm
She's
tired of
saying,
Fetzer speaking for me. Sorry.
She's saying that there was no rubble. The name of the book is called "Where Did the Towers Go?" She said that direct energy weapons, some kind of direct energy weapons, dustified the buildings, turned the buildings to dust because there was no rubble.
A dude gave me a book on that.
Have you seen that?
You
It's
got to
crazy.
read this. He's like,
In Australia? In Australia?
No, he's in America. He was in LA. He told me they use Tesla technology. I was like, what? He gave me
Eddie,
this
I'm
book.
not saying you're wrong to ask that question.
You know what? For me, it doesn't matter if it was justified or they blew
I
them
have
up
been
Las
accused-
Vegas style.
I have
It doesn't
been
matter.
accused- here's the
Those
thing.
buildings, in my opinion,
In Sandy
got blown
Hook,
up.
If there's any time in history where you could go in a time machine and go back and observe, would that be the time?
I am just completely fascinated by the Ice Age at the moment.
If you had one shot to go back and see what it was like in some place, you wouldn't go to the construction of the Great Pyramids?
I think right now where I'd go is 12,800 years ago in the beginning of the Younger Dryas.
Just to see.
Because I think that's where the whole human story changes. I think that's where we change tracks from one path to another path. And following those cataclysmic events of the Younger Dryas between 12,800 and 11,600 years ago, following those, the signs of civilization that we see emerging are not the beginnings of civilization. They're a restarting of civilization that had existed before the cataclysm. And for that reason, I would like to be present during that cataclysmic event, if only to satisfy myself that it was indeed a comet. You see, the one thing there's no dispute about anymore is that the Younger Dryas was a cataclysm. You can't argue about that. The megafauna that die off, the disruption of human activity that takes place at that time, the huge climate changes. This was a cataclysm by any standards. Where the argument still goes on is what caused the cataclysm. I vote strongly for comet, multiple fragments of a comet hitting the North American ice cap and hitting Greenland as well. But there are other researchers in the field, like my colleague Robert Schoch, who thinks that the sun is more involved. This is healthy. This is very, very healthy, that we should be approaching this problem from many different perspectives and trying to figure out what the fuck caused this extraordinary event that occurs at a pivotal moment in the human story. The end of the Stone Age, the beginning of the Mesolithic, the end of the Ice Age, the beginning of the current age of the Earth. And suddenly we see these signs of civilization appearing, and in places like Göbekli Tepe, those signs already include highly sophisticated knowledge. And that's why I feel we really need to investigate the Amazon. There are 3 places in the world which are really lacking in the investigation right now. One of them is the Amazon, 5.5 million square kilometers, very little archaeology done. Another is the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert, tough place to work. I can understand why there's little archaeology done there, but the Sahara Desert was green during the Ice Age. It had a completely different climate regime. We should consider the possibility that missing parts of the human story are there. And then under the continental shelves, because sea level rose 400 feet. These are 3 domains that archaeology has largely not investigated. And it has largely not done so. They say, well, why would we spend the money on marine archaeology? It's much better to spend it on looking for shipwrecks rather than looking for signs of a lost civilization, because we archaeologists know there was no lost civilization. So that's the argument for the resources there. And the same with the Amazon, and the same with the Sahara Desert. Very places in the world that those amongst us who are charged with the responsibility of interpreting the past have not looked at are the very places we should be looking at.
And Atlantis has always been the big one. That has been the one that everybody talked about, was this incredibly advanced civilization, and no one can figure out where it is.
Right.
Or if it was real.
I think that Atlantis, because surely that wouldn't have been necessarily the name just through like the change of language, over, let's say, 12, 13,000 years ago, which would be the time frame. So like surely there would be several different changes of language, but I think it represented a civilization that was doing great things. They were more global than what many people think would be possible. Atlantis was said to be a kingdom made up of, or an empire, made up of 10 kingdoms. And then there was the lost city of Atlantis, which was the capital, which was said to be made up of concentric circles, 2 of water, 3 of land, and essentially that they were obliterated by a cataclysm, as passed down by Plato, although it's worth mentioning that Plato got the story of Atlantis from Solon, who was his uncle separated by 6 generations. But what most people don't realize is that Solon had traveled to Egypt, and so it's the ancient Egyptians is where that tale comes from, which makes it even more bizarre, because I would argue that the most spectacular ancient civilization is the Egyptians. I mean, no disrespect to the Romans.
Hard to deny.
Right? I mean, when I first saw this, I was like, what the fuck is that? By the way, you see that white, all those white blemishes? That's salt. This was under the ocean. And people, let me just say, you mentioned Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. I love them. And I know for sure that they don't particularly think this is the site for a few different reasons. So let me say there's absolute doubt. Even I am not 100% certain. I'm not even 100% certain Atlantis existed. What I am certain is that humans were doing spectacular things, and a cataclysmic event happened called the Younger Dryas and reset something for somebody.
Salt. All that was salt. But I mean, it used to be underwater, right? It's salt because it was underwater.
That's what I believe, and that's what makes the most sense to me. Others will disagree, and let me tell you why. It is currently 1,300 feet above sea level. It's 250 miles inland. And so some people say this was never under the ocean, at least not for the last tens of millions of years, is what the scientists claim. I argue that since the salt is still there, and not only that, Jamie, if you go to the other images that show you more of the white, the one that you were previously on, the one to the middle to the left, right there. So those areas with the most white blemishes happen to be the areas that are the lowest in elevation, which to me tells me that salt water had settled there. But not only that, Joe, Atlantis was said to be, like we said, multiple rings of, water and land. However, it was said to open to the sea to the south. And what you're looking at here, the south, so this is oriented north, south, east, and west. What do you see to the south? And especially if we could get another...
This is a very flat area that looks like it's the lowest elevation. Like around it looks like it's higher. I mean, it's hard to tell from this image.
Jamie, will you Google map it? Just type in... even if you went to Mauritania, so you could see this from space. Astronauts use it as a locator and they weren't really familiar or aware of it until the Gemini missions in the early 1960s. So he analyzed this site, and you see all the striations, how it looks like the ocean, so that's all water erosion, Joe. And if you scroll in, so remember when Randall was on your show and he showed you the Missoula floodplains and all those giant ripples from the huge current that it went through? This is here. So scroll in, right there where your cursor is, Jamie. Scroll right in. You're going to see those same water ripples. Keep going, because this what you're looking at here is panned out. This is many miles. Like, keep in mind, this structure is 30 miles across.
That's crazy. That looks like the bottom of the ocean, like if you see where the water breaks on the sand.
Yep. And I have
wow, that's
better
crazy.
pictures. And that, just to clarify, that white is salt, and that is because that's a lot of people don't know, Joe, that the Sahara Desert wasn't a thing until approximately 5,000 years ago. It's only in the last several years, and by the way, I'm quoting MIT research here, that the Sahara goes back and forth from green to desert approximately every 20,000 years. They believe it has something to do with the Earth's tilt, and that's worth discussing. But so this whole area, because people are like, well, that's not Atlantis. I'm like, well, first of all, if the Sahara Desert was a lush green tropical paradise, which had the largest known freshwater lakes ever known to have existed, for example, Mega Lake Chad, which it's like 3 times more water surface than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. It's a big sucker.
Holy shit. How's it not an ocean?
I know.
It's all freshwater?
It was when it existed, and that was at the time when the Sahara was green. And it also had some of the largest known rivers that were known to have existed throughout the world. I think they'd still be ranked 10th today or something like that. But so you have to, when you see this, people have to imagine that this area was once green, and that because one of the arguments I make is that the fact that that salt is on top of that dirt, to me, is indicative that the ocean flowed over here far more recently than what people think.
How wide is this structure?
Okay, so
these concentric circles.
I brought a laser. Do you have a laser pointer in here?
No.
That's okay. So the circles themselves is about 14 and a half miles across. However, if you go the complete shebang, the whole circle itself is just shy of 30 miles.
So the whole thing is 30 miles, which would be like the size of a city.
Right. Well, keep in mind the outer ring would have been water, so that wouldn't have necessarily counted. But some people will say that this is too big according to Plato's description. And let me just say that I'm like, well, hold on a second. I don't think that we should consider that, because of loss of translation, that we should consider the measurements a key detail. The question becomes, is it big enough to be a city with possibly millions of people? Because the way it was described is that it was a city that was said to be busy all day, all night, rich in trade, with languages spoken from all over. So I'm like, okay, that would imply millions of people. I mean, if a city's busy all day and all night, I think of large metropolitan areas like New York, Chicago, London, whatever. And so if this was indeed an ancient or a site of an ancient civilization, well, then it would have. I mean, they're obviously not going to have skyscrapers, so it would have to be an area big enough to sustain that many people, and the Richat structure certainly does.
20,000 years ago, this was all green, lush forest?
No, Joe, 5,000.
5,000?
So
really?
So I could show you.
When did they think Atlantis was?
11,600 is allegedly when it was destroyed, which mirrors the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. Because so Plato so this is 600 BC, and Plato said that it happened 9,000 years earlier. So that would be 11,600 years ago, which coincides with the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe, which makes it so compelling. To me, that is actual scientific evidence that indicates that Atlantis actually existed. Because it's very specific.
It is very specific, but it's not scientific, right? It's like there's no real evidence.
Okay, let me rephrase. That a civilization, let me rephrase. A civilization got fucked.
Yeah.
11,600. So never mind Atlantis. Let me rephrase. A civilization was around. The stories of it were passed down, and they got obliterated. So that's what I'm implying.
Well, we definitely know that the Younger Dryas impact theory is extremely plausible. There are, without a doubt, like many impact points on Earth where they find this tritonite, this nuclear glass, which you can get either from a nuclear explosion or you get it from some sort of a meteor impact, large scale, all over the continent. And we know that all over the planet, I should say. We know that happened. Like, this is like real hardcore geological evidence. So if we know that there were structures before that, which we do now because of Göbekli Tepe and a few other places that they're reasonably sure were pre 11,000 years ago, 12,000 years ago, then we know that something was around back then that was very sophisticated. How sophisticated, we don't know.
Is above the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid are 5 further chambers. And these chambers are roofed and floored with granite beams that weigh about 70 tons each. And there are hundreds of them. And these 70-ton granite beams, which to put in context, a 70-ton beam is equivalent in weight to 35 large SUVs. These 70-ton granite beams have been elevated to a height of more than 350 feet above the ground and carefully and precisely placed in position. It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? And the answer is you need a fucking long ramp, which should still be there, because it couldn't have been a sand ramp. It would have collapsed under the weight of those stones. It had to be as massive as the pyramid itself. So this begins to seem like an absurd idea, the idea that is foisted on us by archaeology. Maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, namely that psychic powers were cultivated by ancient civilizations, that they could use powers of the human mind that we have allowed to lapse, maybe that idea deserves further consideration. We have gone down a path of leverage and mechanical advantage. We're used to relying on machines, but we hear anecdotal reports of people who have telekinetic powers, who can move things with their minds, of people who have telepathic powers. And our automatic reaction is to just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible, because science regards consciousness as local to the brain and doesn't see how it can exert itself outside of that. But maybe we should open up to those possibilities, that we're dealing with a very different kind of culture that used techniques that we have allowed to lapse. And maybe we could wake those techniques up again. Maybe the ability of human beings to do almost superhuman things is resident within all of us, but sleeping.